The trauma bay doors didn't swing open at 2:47 a.m. They surrendered. Dr. Maya Chen looked up from suturing a teenager's knife wound, her hands steady despite 16 hours into a double shift, and felt the atmospheric pressure in the room shift. Conversations died mid-sentence. The drunk in Bay 3 stopped shouting. Even Officer Rodriguez, who'd seen everything in 20 years on the south side, straightened his posture without conscious thought. The man who entered didn't rush, didn't shout, didn't need to. He was over 6 feet of controlled fury, wrapped in charcoal wool that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. His face could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and harder edges, with eyes that swept the emergency department like targeting systems, calculating threat levels and exit strategies. Dark hair, immaculate despite the hour. Hands that hung loose at his sides, but somehow suggested violence held on a very short leash. Behind him, 3 men carried a woman in her 60s. Her lips were blue-tinged. Her breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. Her skin had the waxy pallor Maya had learned to recognize in medical school, the color of someone circling the drain. She needs help, not a request, not a plea, a statement of fact delivered in a voice like gravel and smoke. Now. Maya's clinical instincts kicked in before her brain could process the danger radiating off this man like heat from asphalt in August. Gurney, now. Sarah, get me vitals. Someone page cardiology. She closed the distance to the woman in 4 quick strides, her sneakers squeaking on linoleum that had seen too much blood and not enough funding. Ma'am, can you hear me? Can you tell me what hurts? The woman's eyes rolled, unfocused. Her hand clutched at her chest with trembling fingers. Classic presentation, but Maya needed more data. When did symptoms start? Maya's hands were already checking pulse points, noting the rapid, thready heartbeat, the cold sweat beating on the woman's forehead. 3 hours ago. The man's voice was tight with something that might have been fear in someone less contained. She said it was indigestion. She refused to come until she passed out. Maya's team swarmed the gurney with practiced efficiency, the kind that came from working in a level I trauma center where Saturday nights looked like war zones and funding was always 6 months from drying up completely. Heart rate 118, blood pressure 89/56 and dropping, Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. Oxygen sat 91%. She's diaphoretic, skin is cold and clammy. Possible MI, possibly unstable angina, possibly worse. Maya was already listening to the woman's chest, noting the irregular rhythm, the slight crackle that suggested fluid where it shouldn't be. She looked up at the charge nurse. Get me a 12-lead EKG, cardiac enzymes, chest x-ray, and somebody find Dr. Harrison. Tell him we might need the cath lab. Then she made the mistake of looking directly at the man. His eyes were black as midnight and twice as dangerous. He was watching her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but instead felt like being evaluated by something predatory and impossibly intelligent. Like a wolf deciding if you were threat, prey, or something else entirely. You need to step back so we can work, Maya said, holding his gaze. 12 years of emergency medicine had taught her that showing fear was the fastest way to lose control of a situation. Family waiting room is through those doors. I don't leave her. Flat, final. The tone of someone who'd never been told no and survived the experience to tell about it. Maya planted herself between him and the gurney, all 5'6" of her, still in blood-spattered scrubs from the teenager she just finished with. In this department, you absolutely do. I've got maybe a 15-minute window to stabilize your mother, grandmother, before we're looking at catastrophic cardiac failure. Every second you stand there hovering is a second I'm not saving her life. So I'm going to be very clear. Move, or security will move you. Something flickered in those black eyes. Surprise, maybe, possibly respect. Definitely not something she could interpret, because men like this didn't broadcast their thoughts like normal humans. The air went taut as a tripwire. Then, incredibly, he stepped back. 2 measured steps that somehow felt like a strategic retreat rather than a surrender. You let her die, he said quietly, and what happens next won't be your decision. It should have sounded like a threat, Maybe it was a threat, but underneath the words, Maya heard what he wasn't saying. Please, save her. She's all I have. Noted, Maya said crisply. Now get out of my before I have you arrested for obstruction. He left. His entourage followed like well-trained wolves tracking their alpha. Maya exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Doc, Sarah murmured, close enough that the others couldn't hear. That's Viktor Volkov. You just told Viktor Volkov to get out. The name meant nothing to Maya. Should it? She glanced at Sarah's face, pale under her dark skin, eyes slightly too wide, and realized yes, apparently it should. Don't care if he's the Pope, Maya said, turning back to her patient. Right now, his mother. Aunt. His aunt is coding. Get me the crash cart, now. The next 90 minutes blurred into the familiar rhythm of emergency intervention. Maya lived in that space between life and death, where decisions had to be made in seconds and second-guessing could kill. The EKG showed a ST elevation in 3 leads, a massive heart attack in progress. The woman, Katerina Volkov, according to the ID in her purse, was circling the drain fast. Dr. Harrison arrived, bless him, still wearing pajama pants under his white coat. What have we got? 63-year-old female, SDEMI, probably anterior wall MI based on the EKG pattern. Troponins are through the roof. I've got her on heparin, aspirin, morphine for pain. Pressure's stabilized at 95/60, but she's still tachycardic. She needs the cath lab, like yesterday. Harrison was already reviewing the chart, his experienced eyes cataloging the same details Maya had noted. Good catch. Let's get her upstairs. You coming? Maya hesitated. She should stay in the ED. They were chronically understaffed, and the waiting room still had 12 people who needed attention. But something about this case, or maybe something about the man in the waiting room whose eyes had promised violence and begged for mercy in the same breath, made her nod. Yeah, I'm coming. She found him in the surgical waiting area, standing by the window overlooking the city lights. He hadn't sat down, hadn't accepted coffee from the volunteer, just stood there like a monument to controlled rage, flanked by 2 of his men who watched the room with the hypervigilance of soldiers in hostile territory. Mr. Volkov. He turned. Up close, without the adrenaline of emergency intervention clouding her judgment, Maya could catalog the details. The slight scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble that suggested he'd been awake too long, the expensive watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her student loans. The hands that should have been soft from wealth, but instead bore the calluses and old scars of someone who'd done physical violence personally. Dr. Chen. He knew her name. Why did he know her name? My aunt. Dr. Harrison is the best interventional cardiologist in the city. He's taking her to the cardiac catheterization lab now. She had a significant heart attack, what we call an ST elevation myocardial infarction. Part of her heart muscle wasn't getting blood flow. Dr. Harrison is going to thread a catheter through her femoral artery to the blocked vessel and place a stent to restore blood flow. She kept her voice professional, clinical, the same tone she'd used thousands of times to explain medical procedures to frightened families. But something about the way he listened, with complete focus, as if her words were the most important thing in his universe, made her hyper-aware of every syllable. Will she live? The question was simple. The weight behind it was anything but. The next few hours are critical. The surgery itself has about a 90% success rate, but she's had significant cardiac damage. We won't know the full extent until Dr. Harrison can assess the situation directly. I can tell you that she's stable right now, her vitals are responding to intervention, and she's getting the best care available. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you. Maya held his gaze. Medicine isn't guarantees, Mr. Volkov. It's probabilities and best practices and sometimes luck. Your aunt has a good chance. That's all I can promise. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he nodded once, sharp and definitive, and turned back to the window. Maya should have left, should have returned to the ED where 12 patients were waiting and Sarah was probably drowning. Should have written up her notes and moved on to the next emergency because that was the job. Instead, she heard herself say, "When's the last time you slept?" He didn't turn around. Why does that matter? Because you're swaying on your feet. Because your hands are trembling. Not much, but enough that I notice. Because you've been running on adrenaline and caffeine for at least 24 hours, and when your aunt wakes up, she's going to need you functional, not collapsed. I don't collapse. Everyone collapses eventually. It's biology, not weakness. Maya moved to stand beside him at the window, maintaining professional distance, but close enough to see the exhaustion carved into his features. He couldn't be older than 40, but his eyes looked ancient. There's a family sleep room down the hall. 2 hours of rest won't kill you. 2 hours away from her might. The surgery will take at least 90 minutes. Recovery another hour minimum before she's conscious enough to know you're there. You've got time. He finally looked at her, and Maya saw something flicker in those black eyes. Not gratitude exactly. Something more complicated. Something that made her pulse kick up in a way that had nothing to do with medicine. You're very persistent, Dr. Chen. I'm very good at my job, and part of my job is keeping families functional through crisis. You're no good to your aunt if you're running on empty. Is that your professional medical opinion? It's common sense, which you'd recognize if you weren't so exhausted you can barely think straight. She pulled out her phone, set an alarm. 90 minutes. That's when Dr. Harrison should be finishing up. I'll come get you personally before he briefs you on the results. Why? The question caught her off guard. Why what? Why do you care if I rest? You've done your job. My aunt is in surgery. You could walk away right now and never think about me again. He moved closer, close enough that Maya could smell his cologne, something expensive with cedar and bergamot, and underneath it, the sharp copper scent of old blood that never quite washed out. So why are you still here? Because you looked like you were about to break when she crashed, and I know what it's like to watch someone you love slip away while you're powerless to stop it. Because underneath the threats and the tailored suit, you're just human, and I took an oath to help humans. Because something about you makes me want to understand what shaped you into this particular kind of dangerous. Maya said none of those things. Because it's 4:00 a.m. and I've been on shift for 17 hours, and if I don't do something useful, I'll start stress-eating vending machine candy until I'm sick. Consider it self-preservation. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite human, but something. You're a terrible liar, Dr. Chen. I'm actually an excellent liar. Years of telling patients this won't hurt, and the bill won't be that bad. You're just perceptive. She gestured toward the hallway. Sleep room, 90 minutes. I'll set my alarm and come get you before Harrison finishes. Deal. He studied her for another long moment, and Maya had the uncomfortable sensation of being completely transparent. Like he could see through her professional demeanor to the curiosity underneath, the dangerous interest in a man who was clearly, obviously, absolutely someone she should avoid. Deal, he said finally, but Dr. Chen. Yes. I don't forget debts. You're saving my aunt's life tonight. That means something in my world, whether you want it to or not. He walked away before she could respond, his two shadows falling into step behind him. Maya watched them go and tried to ignore the way her heart was racing, the way her hands were trembling now that the adrenaline was fatting. Sarah appeared at her elbow like a dark-skinned guardian angel, with worry written all over her face. Girl, tell me you did not just make a deal with Viktor Volkov. Who is he? Maya asked, though she was starting to suspect she didn't want the answer. Who is he? Maya, he runs half the organized crime in the city, Russian Bratva. The FBI has a task force dedicated to taking him down. Sarah lowered her voice, he's not someone you want owing you favors. People who get involved with men like him don't usually end well. Maya looked down at her hands, still steady despite everything. He's a patient's family member, that's all. I treated his aunt. That's my job. Your job doesn't include personal wake-up calls and sleep room recommendations. No, it didn't, which begged the question, why had she done it? Before Maya could examine that thought too closely, her pager went off. Trauma incoming, gunshot wound to the abdomen, ETA 5 minutes. She pushed Viktor Volkov and his dangerous eyes, and his even more dangerous gratitude out of her mind, and ran toward the ambulance bay. Because that was her job. That was her life. Save who you can, stabilize the rest, and don't get emotionally involved with patients or their families, especially when those families could probably make you disappear without a trace. She made it through the gunshot wound. Through and through, missed all major organs, the kid would probably live, and 2 more cases before her alarm went off. 90 minutes exactly. Maya found herself walking toward the sleep room before she could talk herself out of it, before common sense could reassert itself. She knocked softly on the door. "Mr. Volkov, surgery's finishing up." The door opened immediately. He'd removed his jacket, revealing a black shirt that probably cost more than her car. He'd also clearly not slept. His eyes were still alert, still assessing, still that particular kind of dangerous that suggested he'd spent the 90 minutes planning responses to every possible outcome. "How is she?" "I haven't heard yet, but we should head to the consultation room. Dr. Harrison will meet us there." They walked in silence through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and desperation, past rooms where other families waited for other outcomes, past the normal chaos of a hospital at dawn. Dr. Harrison was waiting, still in his surgical cap, looking tired but satisfied. "Mr. Volkov, the procedure went well. We placed 2 stents, one in the left anterior descending artery, one in the circumflex. Blood flow is restored. Your aunt is stable." Maya watched Viktor Volkov's face and saw something she hadn't expected. His eyes closed briefly, and his shoulders dropped maybe an inch. Relief. Pure, unfiltered human relief. "When can I see her?" "She's in recovery now. Another hour or so once she's more alert. But Mr. Volkov," Harrison's expression turned serious, "this was a significant cardiac event. She'll need lifestyle changes, medication, cardiac rehab. This isn't something you recover from and forget about." "Whatever she needs." "Good, Dr. Chen, you want to be on the case." Maya's eyes widened slightly. She was an ED physician, not a cardiologist. "I don't usually follow cases past initial stabilization." "I know, but something tells me Mr. Volkov would appreciate continuity of care, and you did excellent work tonight. Consider it a consulting role. Make sure her recovery plan is comprehensive." Which meant make sure the dangerous crime boss stays cooperative with treatment, Maya translated silently. Great. Perfect. Exactly what her life needed, more exposure to a man who made her pulse race and her common sense flee. "Of course," she heard herself say, "happy to help." Harrison left to check on other post-op patients, which left Maya alone in the consultation room with Viktor Volkov, and a silence that felt weighted with unspoken things. "Thank you," his voice was quiet, genuine, "for everything tonight." "I was doing my job." "You did more than your job." He pulled something from his pocket, a business card, matte black with silver lettering, just a phone number, no name, no title. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, day or night, this is a direct line, no intermediaries." Maya stared at the card like it might bite her. "Mr. Volkov, I can't accept." "It's not payment. It's not a bribe. It's a resource. In my experience, Dr. Chen, good people often need help the system won't provide. When that happens, you call this number." She should refuse, should hand it back and walk away and forget this entire night ever happened. Instead, she took the card. "I need to get back to the ED." "Of course." But he didn't move, didn't step aside, just watched her with those impossibly dark eyes. "One question before you go." "What?" "That teenager you were suturing when I came in, knife wound." "Gang-related, probably. You treated him like he mattered." "He does matter." "Most doctors in this city wouldn't think so. Wouldn't waste expensive supplies and valuable time on gang members who'll probably end up dead in a week anyway. But you did. Why?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "Because when someone's bleeding on my table, I don't care about their past or their future or what choices brought them there. I care about keeping them alive. That's the job. That's the oath. Everyone matters, Mr. Volkov. even when the system says they don't. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like recognition, like he'd been searching for something and just found it. "Everyone matters," he repeated softly. "I'll remember you said that, Dr. Maya Chen." He stepped aside then, finally giving her space to leave. Maya walked away feeling his eyes on her back, burning between her shoulder blades with an intensity that sent entirely inappropriate shivers down her spine. She made it back to the ED, back to the familiar chaos of triage and treatment, back to her real life. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight, that the city had just gotten smaller and more dangerous. That Viktor Volkov wasn't done with her yet. And the most terrifying part, she wasn't sure she wanted him to be. 5 days passed before Viktor Volkov walked back into Maya Chen's life. 5 days during which she told herself the black business card burning a hole in her wallet meant nothing. 5 days of double shifts and gunshot wounds, and telling herself that the way her pulse had raced around him was just adrenaline, just exhaustion, just anything other than attraction to a man who probably had a body count higher than her patient census. 5 days of lying to herself. She was in the staff break room, stuffing her face with cold pizza left over from someone's birthday celebration. Her scrubs stretched across curves that had only gotten curvier since medical school. Maya had given up apologizing for her body years ago. She was a size 16 on good days, 18 on pizza days, and she'd stopped caring what anyone thought about it somewhere around her 3rd year of residency, when she realized thin doctors didn't save lives any better than fat ones. Her natural hair was pulled back in a puff, her dark skin showing the exhaustion of another 16-hour shift. She was just biting into her second slice when Sarah burst through the door, eyes wide. "He's back." Maya didn't need to ask who. Her stomach did a complicated flip that had nothing to do with the pizza. "Mrs. Volkov, okay?" "Not her, him, and he's asking for you specifically, again." Sarah lowered her voice. "Girl, he's been waiting for 30 minutes, wouldn't see anyone else. His bodyguards are making patients nervous." Maya set down the pizza with more regret than was probably healthy. "Where?" "Consultation room 3. She should have sent someone else. Should have claimed she was busy, off shift, literally anything other than walking straight toward danger, wearing pepperoni-stained scrubs and 3-day-old mascara. Instead, she checked her reflection in the break room mirror, a losing battle, and headed down the corridor. He was standing by the window again, same position as before, like he couldn't trust furniture or maybe couldn't trust stillness. He turned when she entered, and Maya's breath caught despite her best efforts at professional detachment. He looked terrible, not dangerous terrible. He'd never not looked dangerous, but human terrible, exhausted. The kind of bone-deep weariness that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too many problems that couldn't be solved with money or violence. "Mr. Volkov, is your aunt?" "She's fine, recovering well, complaining about the hospital food and demanding to go home, which the doctors tell me is a good sign." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I came to thank you properly." "I told you I was just doing your job. Yes, you've said that." He held out the envelope. "Consider this a donation to the hospital, then, not payment for you specifically. The emergency department clearly needs funding, better equipment, more staff. This seemed appropriate." Maya didn't take it. "How much?" "Enough to matter, not enough to raise questions." His eyes met hers. "Please let me do this." There was something in his voice, a vulnerability that didn't match the tailored suit or the bodyguards or the reputation that preceded him like a storm warning. Maya found herself taking the envelope despite every screaming instinct. "I'll make sure it goes to the right departments." "Thank you." Silence stretched between them, weighted with unspoken things. He should leave. She should make him leave. Instead, they both stood there like idiots until Maya noticed something off about his posture, not pain exactly, but tension. The kind of tension that came from carrying secrets too heavy to hold alone. "Is there something else?" Her clinical instincts were firing. "You didn't come here just to drop off a donation." His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he'd leave, retreat behind those walls he'd built so carefully. Then he moved to the chair, sat down heavily, and rubbed his face with both hands. My aunt said something while she was recovering, about how I need to stop living like I'm already dead. He looked up at her, and Maya saw exhaustion mixed with something darker. Shame, maybe, or fear. She said I should talk to you, that you're someone who might actually understand. Understand what? That some things break and never heal, that some damage is permanent. He leaned back, his expensive suit somehow making him look more vulnerable, not less. You asked why I looked the way I did when she was dying, why I was so afraid. Most people are afraid, and someone they love is in danger. It's not just that, he stopped, started again. She's the only family I have left, the only person who knew me before I became this. He gestured at himself with something like disgust. Before I became a man who solves problems with violence, before I became someone people fear. Maya moved to sit across from him, her curves settling into the chair as she leaned forward with the focused attention she gave all her patients. What happened to you, Victor? 9 years ago, I was almost killed. Rival organization, territorial dispute, the usual stupidity that passes for business in my world. His voice was flat, clinical, like he was describing someone else's trauma. They shot me 3 times, chest, abdomen, groin, left me to bleed out in an alley. Maya's medical brain immediately cataloged the implications of those wound locations, but she stayed quiet, letting him talk. I survived, obviously. Emergency surgery, weeks in the ICU, months of recovery. The doctors said I was lucky. His laugh was bitter. Lucky, that's what they called it. Lucky to be alive with half my body held together with surgical staples and scar tissue. The groin wound, Maya said carefully. There were complications. It wasn't a question. He heard the understanding in her voice, and something in his expression cracked. I haven't been able to achieve an erection in 9 years. The words came out raw, stripped of the careful control he usually maintained. Not with medication, not with devices, not with therapy. The bullet damaged nerves, tore through blood vessels. The surgeons saved my life, but he gestured vaguely at himself. Some things they couldn't save. Maya processed this information professionally, even as her heart ached for the vulnerability in his admission. This man who controlled empires through force, admitting to the most intimate kind of dysfunction. Have you seen specialists? Every urologist who will take my money and not ask questions about bullet trajectories. Physical therapy, psychological counseling, experimental treatments in 3 countries. His hands clenched into fists. Nothing works. Nothing. The doctors say it's a combination of nerve damage and psychological trauma. My body shut down to protect me and never started back up. And your aunt wants you to talk to me because she sees how I live. No relationships, no intimacy, no vulnerability. I've built an empire, but I exist in it alone. She thinks. He stopped, looked away. She thinks I've given up on being human, that I've accepted being broken. Maya was quiet for a long moment, her mind racing through treatment options, medical literature, case studies. She'd read about trauma-induced sexual dysfunction. This wasn't her specialty, but she knew enough to understand that what he was describing wasn't necessarily permanent. Victor, look at me. He did, those dark eyes full of a pain that had nothing to do with physical wounds. SHH, she said softly, her voice gentle in a way that surprised them both. Let me take a look at this. Not physically, she added quickly when his eyebrows rose. I mean, let me understand what's actually happening. Because from what you're describing, this isn't just physical damage. Your nervous system learned that vulnerability equals death. It's protecting you by shutting down anything that requires letting your guard down. I've heard this before, from 6 different therapists. But did any of them actually address the root cause? Did they work on the trauma itself, or just try to medicate around it? Maya leaned forward, her professional confidence overriding her awareness that she was way outside her usual scope of practice. Your body experienced extreme violence in the most vulnerable moment possible. It's not broken, Victor. It's terrified. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. or the memory of hope from before he learned to live without it. And you think you can fix that? I think you haven't tried the right approach yet. She pulled out her tablet, already searching for information. There's a specialist I know, Dr. Okonkwo at Northwestern. She works with combat veterans dealing with similar issues. Post-traumatic sexual dysfunction, they call it. Combination of physical therapy, trauma processing, and carefully managed medical intervention. I've tried everything, Maya. Have you tried working with someone who specializes in trauma-induced sexual dysfunction specifically? Not just a urologist treating the physical symptoms, but someone who understands that your body is holding onto a threat response from 9 years ago. She found Dr. Okonkwo's information, made a note to herself. The treatment is intensive. Twice weekly therapy sessions, possibly EMDR for the psychological component, pelvic floor rehabilitation, and medications to help retrain your nervous system response. Victor stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. You really think there's a chance? I think the human body wants to heal. Sometimes it just needs the right support and the right approach. Maya met his gaze steadily. But Victor, this isn't going to be easy. You're going to have to confront what happened 9 years ago. Really confront it, not just push it down and pretend you've dealt with it. I'm not good at being vulnerable. I noticed, but if you want to reclaim this part of yourself, vulnerability isn't optional. You're going to have to trust the process. Trust the therapist. Trust that your body isn't permanently broken, just protecting you the only way it knows how. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression shifting through emotions Maya couldn't quite read. Then, why are you doing this? This isn't emergency medicine. This isn't your job. Because you're in pain. The words came out before she could filter them. Not physical pain, well, maybe that too, but psychological pain. This has been defining your life for 9 years, making you feel less than whole, less than human, and I don't think you can afford to feel less than human in your line of work. I haven't felt human in a very long time. Then maybe it's time to try. Maya pulled out her phone, typed in Dr. Okonkwo's contact information. I'm going to send you her details. She's expensive, but I'm guessing that's not an issue. More importantly, she's discreet. She doesn't ask questions. She just helps people heal. And if it doesn't work, if I go through all of this and I'm still... He couldn't finish the sentence. Then you're no worse off than you are now, but at least you'll know you tried everything, including the right thing. Maya surprised herself by reaching across the space between them, her hand touching his briefly. A gesture of comfort that felt far more intimate than it should have. You deserve to be whole, Victor, even if you don't believe that right now. His hand caught hers before she could pull away, his grip warm and firm and desperately gentle. You're remarkable, Dr. Maya Chen. Do you know that? I'm practical and stubborn, and I really hate seeing people suffer when there are solutions they haven't tried yet. She gently extracted her hand, reestablishing professional boundaries even as her skin tingled where he'd touched her. Promise me you'll call Dr. Okonkwo. I promise. This week, not someday, this week. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. A real one, not the careful mask he usually wore. Are you always this bossy with patients? Only the stubborn ones who have given up on themselves. Maya stood, smoothing her scrubs over her generous curves with unconscious grace. You should go. I have actual emergencies waiting. He stood too, moving into her space with the kind of deliberate intensity that made her pulse spike. They were close now. Close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to meet his eyes, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with coffee and something uniquely him. I meant what I said before, he said quietly, about owing you if you ever need anything. I won't. But if you do. Victor, her voice was gentle but firm. I appreciate the gesture, but let's be clear about what this is. I'm a doctor helping a patient access appropriate care. That's all. Is it? His eyes searched her face. Because it feels like more than that. It feels like you see me. The real me underneath everything else. And I can't remember the last time anyone looked at me like I was worth seeing. Maya's breath caught. This was dangerous territory, the kind of territory that led good people into bad decisions. She should shut this down, should maintain professional distance, should absolutely not let herself feel the pull of attraction to a man who existed in a world of violence. "I see a human being in pain," she said carefully. "That's what I'm trained to see. Don't mistake professional compassion for something else. And if I want it to be something else, then you're going to be disappointed." She stepped back, putting physical distance between them because her body was betraying her better judgment. "I don't date patients. I don't get involved with complicated men. And I definitely don't get involved with men whose business involves the kind of violence that leaves bullet wounds. I'm not asking you to get involved with my business. I'm asking if I can see you again, outside the hospital, coffee maybe, or dinner, just talking. About your treatment plan. About whatever you want to talk about. How you ended up in emergency medicine. Why you care so much about broken people. What it's like being brilliant and beautiful in a world that probably doesn't appreciate either nearly enough." The words hit her like a physical touch. Beautiful. He'd called her beautiful. Not in spite of her curves or her dark skin or her complete lack of glamour at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday in pizza-stained scrubs. Just beautiful. Period. "One coffee," she heard herself say, her common sense screaming in protest. "Neutral location. Public place. You tell me more about your medical history so I can better coordinate your care with Dr. Okonkwo." "Medical consultation, of course." His smile was slow and knowing and absolutely unfair. "Tomorrow afternoon, there's a cafe on State Street, very public, very neutral. Text me the address." She was already regretting this. "And Victor, this is professional, coordinating care, nothing more." "Whatever you say, Dr. Chen." But his eyes said he didn't believe her any more than she believed herself. He left, his bodyguards materializing from wherever they'd been lurking. Maya stood in the empty consultation room, her heart racing, her hands trembling slightly, wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. Sarah appeared in the doorway like an avenging angel. "Please tell me you did not just agree to meet that man outside the hospital." "Medical consultation. I'm helping coordinate his care with a specialist." "Girl," Sarah's look was pure skepticism. "That man did not look at you like you were his doctor. He looked at you like you were everything he's been missing for 9 years and just found again. He's dealing with serious medical trauma. I'm connecting him with appropriate treatment. That's all." "Keep telling yourself that. But Maya," Sarah's expression turned serious. "Men like Viktor Volkov don't do anything casual. If you're opening this door, be damn sure you're ready for what walks through." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to insist this was purely professional, wanted to believe her own lies. Instead, she went back to work, trying to ignore the way her phone felt heavy in her pocket, waiting for his text. It came 15 minutes later. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Lucia's Cafe on State and Monroe. Thank you, Maya, for seeing me as human, for giving me hope I'd forgotten how to feel. V." Maya stared at the message for a long time, her thumb hovering over the delete button. Then she saved his number and tried to ignore the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like her grandmother warning her that some doors, once opened, couldn't be closed again. She just opened a door to a man who hadn't been able to be intimate for 9 years. A man who looked at her like she was water and he'd been dying of thirst. A man who was dangerous and broken, and somehow, impossibly, made her feel seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. This was either the best decision or the worst decision of her life. Tomorrow, she'd find out which. Have you ever taken a risk on someone everyone told you to avoid? Drop a comment. And if you're invested in Maya and Victor's story, smash that like button and subscribe. Because what happens at that cafe will change everything. Maya changed her outfit 4 times before settling on the first thing she'd tried on. This was not, she told herself firmly while staring at her reflection, because she was trying to impress Viktor Volkov. This was purely because her usual wardrobe consisted of scrubs, more scrubs, and that one pair of sweatpants with the hole in the crotch that she refused to throw away because they were *comfortable*. Damn it. She'd settled on dark jeans that hugged her curves in ways that were either flattering or obscene depending on your perspective, a burnt orange sweater that made her dark skin glow, and her favorite leather jacket that made her feel like she could handle anything, including coffee with a Russian mob boss who apparently hadn't had an erection since Obama's first term. "You look like you're going on a date," her roommate Keisha observed from the doorway, her natural hair wrapped in a silk scarf, her expression entirely too knowing. "Medical consultation," Maya said for what felt like the 100th time. "I'm helping coordinate his care." "Uh-huh. And that's why you've been stress-eating Oreos since 6 a.m., and why you're wearing your good-ass jeans." "These are not my good-ass jeans." "Baby girl, those are absolutely your good-ass jeans. You wore them on your last Tinder date with that boring accountant who talked about tax law for 2 hours." "This is not a date," Maya insisted, grabbing her purse with more force than necessary. "This is me being a good doctor and ensuring a patient gets comprehensive care for a complex medical issue." "A complex medical issue with his dick." "Keisha." "What? I'm just saying. You're meeting a fine-ass Russian crime lord to discuss why his equipment hasn't worked in 9 years, and you expect me to believe this is purely professional." Keisha leaned against the doorframe, her smile wicked. "Girl, you haven't been on a real date in 8 months. Your vibrator is gathering dust. Your wound tighter than a $2 watch. Maybe a dangerous man with erectile dysfunction is exactly what you need." "Oh my God, I'm leaving. This conversation is over." "Use protection," Keisha called after her. "Oh, wait." Maya slammed the door on her roommate's cackling laughter. The cafe Victor had chosen was aggressively neutral, the kind of place where grad students nursed overpriced lattes while pretending to write dissertations, and business people had meetings they wanted to look casual. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, indie music playing just loud enough to provide privacy without requiring shouting. She spotted him immediately. Kind of hard not to when he was sitting in the corner booth with sight lines to both exits, flanked by 2 bodyguards who were trying and failing to look casual in their expensive suits. He stood when she approached, and Maya hated that she noticed how well his black sweater fit, how his jeans somehow looked both casual and expensive, how his hair was slightly messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming." His voice was warm, genuinely pleased, with none of the careful control from the hospital. "Maya, if we're doing this outside the hospital, you can call me Maya." She slid into the booth, very aware of how her curves filled the space, how his eyes tracked her movement with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but instead made her skin warm. "Then you should call me Victor. Would you like coffee? They have an impressive menu for a place that looks like a graduate student convention." "Large latte, extra shot. I'm still recovering from a double shift." She studied him openly, nodding the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "When's the last time you slept? And don't lie, I can read exhaustion like it's written in neon." A smile tugged at his mouth. "Has anyone ever told you that you're very direct?" "Constantly. Usually right before they tell me I'm intimidating or too much or need to smile more." She leaned back, getting comfortable. "I stopped caring what people thought about my personality around the same time I stopped apologizing for my body. Life's too short to make myself smaller for other people's comfort." Something flickered in his eyes, respect, maybe, or recognition. "I like that about you. Most people in my world tell me what they think I want to hear. You tell me the truth. Even when the truth is that you look like death, warmed over, and need approximately 16 hours of sleep." "Especially then." He ordered their coffees from a server who couldn't have been older than 19 and who kept shooting nervous glances at the bodyguards. When she left, Victor leaned forward, his attention focused entirely on Maya. "I called Dr. Okonkwo this morning. And she said she'd reviewed cases like mine before. That there's no guarantee, but there are treatment options I haven't tried. Combination approaches. She wants to start with comprehensive evaluation, physical and psychological." He paused. "She also said you called her yesterday to discuss my case." Maya had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I wanted to make sure she understood the complexity, that this isn't just physical trauma but psychological, that you've been living with this for 9 years and probably have layers of coping mechanisms that need to be addressed. You discussed my erectile dysfunction with a stranger. I discussed a medical case with a colleague, yes, without using your name. Patient confidentiality still applies even when I'm being a nosy busybody who can't leave well enough alone. She met his gaze steadily. Are you angry? No, He stopped, seeming to search for the right word. I'm grateful and surprised and slightly terrified that you care this much about fixing a problem you didn't create. I'm a doctor. Fixing problems is literally my job description. This isn't your specialty. You're an emergency physician, not a sexual health specialist or a trauma therapist. You could have referred me and walked away. Instead, you researched treatment options, consulted with specialists, and now you're here having coffee with me when you should probably be sleeping. His eyes were too knowing, too perceptive. Why, Maya? The server chose that moment to return with their coffees, giving Maya a brief reprieve to organize her thoughts. Why was she here? Professional interest didn't explain the 4 outfit changes, or the butterflies in her stomach, or the way her heart had jumped when she'd seen him waiting. Because you looked at me like I was human, she said finally, stirring sugar into her latte with more attention than it required. Not like I was a fat black woman who should be grateful for scraps, not like I was invisible, not like I was less than. You saw me, and I realized I wanted to return the favor. Victor was quiet for a long moment. When she looked up, his expression was raw and honest in a way that made her chest tight. You think you're invisible. I know I'm invisible. Fat women, especially fat black women, we exist in this weird space where we're hypervisible and completely overlooked at the same time. People see the body and make assumptions. Lazy, undisciplined, unhealthy, undesirable. They don't see the person inside. She took a sip of her latte, the familiar bitterness grounding her. You'd be amazed how many people are surprised that I'm a doctor. Like fat people can't be smart or competent or deserving of respect. Their loss. His voice was fierce, almost angry. You're brilliant. You saved my aunt's life. You're compassionate without being condescending. You're direct without being cruel. And you're beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with what you look like and everything to do with who you are. Maya's breath caught. Nobody had said anything like that to her in maybe ever. Men either fetishized her curves or ignored her completely. They didn't see her as a whole person, complex and flawed and brilliant. Thank you. That's a really nice thing to say. It's the truth. He took a drink of his coffee, black and unsweetened, which somehow fit him perfectly. Can I ask you something personal? You just told me you haven't had an erection in 9 years. I think we're past the boundary of personal questions. His laugh was surprised and genuine, transforming his face from dangerous to devastating. Fair point. Why emergency medicine? That's not the typical path. Most doctors want regular hours, predictable problems, patients who follow instructions. Because emergency medicine is honest, Maya said immediately. People come in at their worst, drunk, high, bleeding, dying, terrified. They don't have time to perform or pretend. You see humanity in its rawest form. And yeah, sometimes that humanity is a drunk guy who tried to fight a street sign and lost, but it's real. It's honest. There's something beautiful about that. You find beauty in a man fighting a street sign. I find beauty in the fact that humans are gloriously stupid and impossibly resilient at the same time. We do the dumbest things and somehow survive. We break and we heal and we break again. We're messy and complicated and we keep going anyway. She grinned. Plus, emergency medicine means I never get bored. Every shift is chaos. I thrive in chaos. I noticed. You were very calm when I walked in making threats. Oh, you weren't making threats. You were terrified and trying to control the situation the only way you know how, through intimidation. But your hands were shaking when your aunt crashed. That wasn't the behavior of someone trying to scare me. That was someone who was absolutely fucking terrified and didn't know how to express it. Victor stared at her. You're terrifyingly observant. Comes with the job. I have about 30 seconds to assess if someone's actually sick or drug-seeking, if they're dangerous or just scared. if they're going to comply with treatment or bolt the second my back's turned. You learn to read people fast. She studied him openly. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I'm not sure if I do. Too bad, you asked for personal questions. Maya leaned forward, her elbows on the table, her curves pressing against the edge in ways she'd stopped being self-conscious about years ago. I see a man who spent 9 years building walls so high nobody can see the vulnerability underneath. I see someone who thinks being broken makes him less worthy of care. I see intelligence and control, and a deep well of loneliness that you're so used to you don't even notice it anymore. His jaw tightened. That's accurate. Yeah, I know. I'm good at my job. She softened her voice. I also see someone who showed up today even though this scares you. Someone who's willing to try healing even after 9 years of failed attempts. That takes courage, Victor. More courage than pointing guns at people or running a criminal empire. You think I point guns at people? I think you probably have. I also think that's not all you are, which is why we're sitting here having coffee instead of you sending one of your very large friends to drop off a thank you card. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on his coffee cup. Dr. Okonkwo said the treatment could take months, maybe years, that there's no guarantee it'll work, that I'll have to confront trauma I've spent 9 years avoiding. Sounds about right. She also said I'd need a support system, someone outside the medical team who I trust, who can help hold me accountable, who won't let me give up when it gets hard. He looked up, his dark eyes intense and focused entirely on her. I don't have people like that in my life, Maya. Everyone around me either fears me or wants something from me. Except you. You don't seem to want anything except to help. That's not entirely true. I want your donation to actually go to the ED and not get lost in administrative bullshit. I want references from you to other wealthy people who might fund better equipment. I want... She stopped, caught by the expression on his face. What? You're already thinking about how to leverage my gratitude for the greater good. You're remarkable. I'm practical and mercenary when it comes to getting resources for my department. She took another sip of coffee, considering. What exactly are you asking me, Victor? I'm asking if you'd be willing to work with me through this process. Not as my doctor. Dr. Okonkwo will handle the medical aspects. But as someone who understands the medical side and can help me navigate it. Someone who'll tell me when I'm being an idiot or avoiding the work. Someone who'll... He stopped, seeming to struggle with vulnerability. Someone who'll remind me that being broken doesn't mean I'm unfixable. This was a catastrophically bad idea. Maya knew it with every fiber of her professional training. You didn't get personally involved with patients. You didn't blur boundaries. You absolutely didn't agree to be the emotional support system for a Russian mob boss dealing with sexual trauma. And yet, what would this look like practically? She heard herself ask. Weekly check-ins, coffee dates where you debrief your therapy sessions, me holding your hand through uncomfortable medical procedures. I don't know, I've never done anything like this before. I've never. He stopped, his expression raw. I've never trusted anyone enough to let them see me this vulnerable. But I trust you, Maya. I don't know why, but I do. You trust me because I had my hands literally inside your aunt's chest cavity and didn't flinch. You trust me because I told you to get out of my and you respected it. You trust me because I'm professionally obligated to keep your secrets. She held his gaze. But Victor, this isn't a professional obligation. If I agree to this, I'm doing it because I want to help you heal. Not because you're paying me or because you're dangerous or because I think you owe me something. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Good, then here's how this works. Maya pulled out her phone, opening her calendar. Once a week we meet, preferably somewhere public and neutral like this. You tell me how treatment is going, what you're struggling with, what progress you're making. I provide medical context, reality checks, and aggressive cheerleading when necessary. I also reserve the right to call you on your bullshit whenever I see it. You think you can call me on my bullshit? Baby, I've dealt with drunk white boys trying to explain to me how emergency medicine works while I'm literally saving their lives. I've handled cops who think I'm too stupid to understand basic anatomy. I've survived 12 years in a medical system designed to break people who look like me. You think I can't handle one emotionally constipated crime lord? She grinned. Please, you're barely a warm-up. He laughed, a real, genuine sound that made him look years younger. I'm starting to understand why my aunt liked you so much. Your aunt has excellent taste. Now, ground rules. Maya ticked items off on her fingers. 1, you actually do the work. You show up to appointments, you engage with therapy, you don't half-ass this because it's uncomfortable. 2, you're honest with me. I can handle brutal truth. I can't handle lies or avoidance. 3, we keep this separate from your work. I don't want to know about criminal enterprises or violence or anything that might make me legally obligated to report you to authorities. Agreed. 4, if at any point this becomes genuinely dangerous for me, and I mean physically dangerous, not just emotionally complicated, you tell me and we end this arrangement. I'm willing to help, but I'm not willing to die for it. I would never let anything happen to you. You can't guarantee that, and we both know it, but I appreciate the sentiment. She finished her latte, considering. Last rule, no romantic involvement. This is purely about helping you heal. We're not dating. We're not sleeping together. We're not even flirting. Because if we cross that line, I lose objectivity and you lose the support system you need. Something flickered across Victor's face. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. And if I want to cross that line, then you're going to be disappointed. Maya kept her voice gentle but firm. Victor, you need support right now. You need someone who can be objective, who can see you clearly without the complications of romance or attraction. If we muddy those waters, I can't be that person for you. Even though there's clearly attraction here. Her traitorous body chose that moment to flush, heat creeping up her neck in ways she couldn't control. Attraction doesn't mean we act on it. I'm attracted to lots of people. Doesn't mean I sleep with all of them. Lots of people. His eyebrow rose. Should I be jealous of these mysterious people? You should be focused on your own healing and not on my hypothetical love life. But she was smiling despite herself. Do you agree to the rules or not? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he extended his hand across the table. I agree to your rules, Dr. Maya Chen. Thank you for being willing to help a broken man remember how to be human. She shook his hand, trying to ignore the way her skin tingled where they touched, the way her pulse kicked up, the way something in her chest went warm and soft at his words. You're not broken, Victor. You're wounded. There's a difference. She released his hand reluctantly. Wounded things can heal. Broken things are just broken. You're not beyond repair. You've just been working with the wrong tools. And you're the right tool. I'm a tool, certainly. Whether I'm the right one remains to be seen. She stood, gathering her purse. I need to get going. I have another shift in 4 hours and I should probably sleep at some point this week. Text me after your first appointment with Dr. Okonkwo. We'll set up our next meeting. He stood too, and they were suddenly very close in the crowded cafe. Close enough that Maya had to tilt her head back slightly to meet his eyes. Close enough to see the flecks of gray in the black. Close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. Maya, he said quietly, and the way he said her name made her shiver. Thank you for seeing me, for caring, for being willing to help even though I'm a dangerous criminal with erectile dysfunction and obvious trust issues. She grinned to soften the words. Yeah, well, I've always had terrible taste in fix-it projects. Might as well aim high. She left before she could do something stupid like lean into him, or touch his face, or forget her own rules about keeping this professional. The bodyguards watched her leave with expressions that suggested they were adding her to some kind of internal database. She gave them a cheerful wave that probably confused them more than anything else. Her phone buzzed as she reached her car. Thank you for giving me hope. I'll text after the appointment. V. Maya sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the message, wondering what the hell she'd just signed up for. You're an idiot, she told her reflection in the rearview mirror. A well-meaning, chronically nosy, catastrophically bad at boundaries idiot. Her reflection didn't argue. She drove home, where Keisha was waiting with an expression that demanded details. So, how was your not-date medical consultation with Mr. Tall, Dark, and Dangerous? Complicated. Maya collapsed on the couch, suddenly exhausted. I may have agreed to be his emotional support human while he works through 9 years of sexual trauma. I'm sorry, you what? In my defense, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Girl, Keisha sat down, her expression somewhere between amused and concerned. Let me get this straight. You've agreed to help a Russian crime lord work through erectile dysfunction by having weekly coffee dates where you discuss his therapy progress and provide emotional support. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. That's because it is bad. Maya, this man is dangerous. He's literally a criminal. And you're getting emotionally involved with someone who, Keisha stopped. Wait, do you like him? Like actually like him? No, this is purely about helping someone heal. Professional interest. Professional interest doesn't explain why you wore your good-ass jeans. Oh my God, not you too. I'm just saying, if you're going to get involved with a dangerous man, at least admit you're attracted to him. Lying to me is one thing. Lying to yourself is just sad. Maya threw a pillow at her roommate's head. I'm going to sleep. Wake me in 4 hours or when the world ends, whichever comes first. But as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Victor had looked at her. Like she was remarkable. Like she was exactly what he needed. Like she was beautiful not in spite of her curves and her darkness and her sharp edges, but because of them. Nobody had ever looked at her like that before. And God help her, she wanted him to keep looking at her like that for a very long time. You're so screwed, she whispered to the darkness. The darkness, wisely, didn't argue. Have you ever agreed to help someone and immediately regretted it? Or maybe didn't regret it at all? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you're invested in watching Maya either save Victor or completely destroy her own life in the process, hit that like button and subscribe. 3 weeks into Victor's treatment, Maya learned that helping a crime lord work through sexual trauma was significantly more complicated than she'd anticipated. It started with the text messages. V, first therapy session complete. Dr. Okonkwo is terrifying. Maya, good, you need terrifying, how'd it go? V, she asked about my childhood. I told her it wasn't relevant. She disagreed, strongly. Maya, childhood trauma is always relevant to adult dysfunction. Did you actually engage, or did you do that thing where you answer questions without saying anything meaningful? V, I don't do that thing. Maya, you absolutely do that thing. I've watched you do it. You're doing it right now. V, fine. We talked about my father, happy. Maya, not the word I'd use, but it's progress. Same time next week. V, if I survive until then. Maya, drama queen, you'll be fine. That had been week 1. Week 2, the messages got longer. V, physical therapy is humiliating. They have me doing exercises that make me feel like I'm in a very unsexy yoga class taught by a medical professional who looks at my genitals like they're a science project. Maya, welcome to pelvic floor rehabilitation. It's deeply undignified and absolutely necessary. Are you actually doing the exercises, or are you half-assing it because you're uncomfortable? V, I'm doing them, but I'm not happy about it. Maya, nobody's happy about pelvic floor exercises, Victor. They're called Kegels, and they're what women do after childbirth to avoid peeing themselves. Congratulations, you're finally experiencing what we deal with. V, that's not helping. Maya, sure it is. Now you have perspective. Do your exercises. V, you're mean. Maya, I'm effective. There's a difference. By week 3, Victor had started calling instead of texting. Always late at night, always after particularly difficult therapy sessions, his voice low and rough in ways that made Maya's body respond in thoroughly unprofessional ways. She wants me to talk about the shooting, he said without preamble on a Tuesday night at 11:40. Maya was in bed, wearing her rattiest pajamas and a bonnet, but her pulse still kicked up at the sound of his voice. That makes sense. It's the source of the trauma. I don't want to talk about it. Tough shit. That's literally what therapy is for. She rolled onto her side, phone pressed to her ear. What scares you about talking about it? Silence, long enough that Maya thought he might have hung up. Then, if I let myself remember, really remember, I'm afraid I won't be able to function. That it'll break something in me that's holding everything else together. Victor, you're not functioning now. Not really. You're surviving, there's a difference. I run a successful organization. I'm financially secure. I have power and respect. That sounds like functioning to me. You haven't had an intimate relationship in 9 years. You don't sleep more than 4 hours a night. You're in constant physical pain that you refuse to properly medicate because you think needing help makes you weak. You have exactly one person in your life who you actually care about, and she almost died because you've been so focused on surviving you forgot to make sure she was taking care of herself. Maya's voice was gentle but unrelenting. That's not functioning, baby. That's existing. And you deserve more than just existing. The endearment had slipped out without her permission. She held her breath, waiting for him to call her on it, but he just exhaled slowly. Sometimes, I think you see me more clearly than I see myself. That's because I'm not carrying your trauma. I can be objective. You're too close to it. She paused. What did Dr. Okonkwo actually say about discussing the shooting? That we'd take it slowly, that I don't have to relive every detail at once, that the goal isn't to traumatize me further but to help my body understand that the threat is over, that I'm safe now. And are you safe? Safer than I was 9 years ago. The people who shot me are dead. Their organization is defunct, but in my world there's always another threat. Safety is relative. Then maybe part of the work is learning to feel safe anyway, to let your body relax even when your mind says you can't afford to. Maya pulled her blanket up higher, getting comfortable. Can I ask you something? Always. What actually happened? You said you were shot 3 times, but what were the circumstances? Were you ambushed? Was it planned? He was quiet again, and Maya waited, giving him space to decide if he wanted to answer. It was a setup, he said finally. Meeting to negotiate territory with a rival organization. I thought we were there to talk terms. They had other plans, 3 gunmen. I was lucky, my second-in-command took bullets meant for me. He didn't make it. I did, obviously, but his voice roughened. The shot to the groin wasn't random. It was deliberate. They wanted to humiliate me, to prove I wasn't untouchable. They wanted me to live knowing they'd taken something from me that I could never get back. Maya's chest tightened with fury on his behalf. That's not just violence. That's psychosexual torture. Dr. Okonkwo used almost those exact words. Because it's true. They didn't just try to kill you, Victor. They tried to destroy your sense of yourself as a man. Your ability to be intimate, to be vulnerable, to connect with another human being in the most fundamental way. That's not about territory or business. That's about power and humiliation. I know, and it worked. For 9 years, it worked exactly as they intended. Until now, Maya's voice was fierce. Until you decided to fight back. You know what takes more courage than violence, Victor? Healing. Admitting you're wounded and doing the hard work to recover. That's real strength, not the performative kind, the genuine kind. You always know what to say. I've had practice. I spent 4 years in therapy after medical school working through my own shit. Imposter syndrome, body image issues, childhood trauma from growing up black and fat in a world that told me I was both too much and not enough. Therapy saved my life. I'm a big believer in the process. You're in therapy. I finished my major work a few years ago. Now I just go for tune-ups when life gets overwhelming. She grinned even though he couldn't see it. Why? Does it make me less intimidating to know I have a therapist on speed dial? It makes you more human and more remarkable. You've done this work yourself. You understand what I'm going through. Different trauma, same process. The specifics change, but the healing is universal. Face the wound, feel the feelings, learn new patterns, practice until they become natural. She yawned, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Speaking of which, I need to sleep. I have a shift in 6 hours and I'm already running on fumes. Of course, thank you for talking me down. That's what I'm here for. Well, that and aggressive cheerleading. Tomorrow I'll send you inspirational memes about pelvic floor health. His laugh was warm and genuine. Please don't. Too late, already planning it. Good night, Victor. Good night, Maya, sweet dreams. She hung up and stared at her ceiling, very aware that their relationship was rapidly evolving beyond doctor helping former patient, into something more complicated. Something that felt dangerously like friendship, or possibly something worse. "You're fine," she told herself firmly. "This is fine. You're helping someone heal, that's all." Her heart, traitorous bitch that it was, didn't believe her. The following Saturday, Maya was elbow-deep in trauma bay chaos, literal chaos, involving a wedding party that had gotten into a fight at the reception resulting in 3 stab wounds, 2 broken noses, and 1 very drunk flower girl who kept trying to escape, when Gloria appeared at her elbow. "Your boyfriend is here." Maya didn't look up from the chest tube she was placing. "I don't have a boyfriend." "Fine, your tall, dark, and dangerous not boyfriend is here, with flowers, very expensive flowers, the kind that make women reconsider their life choices." Maya's hands faltered for just a second. "Tell him I'm busy. He can leave them at the desk." "He says he'll wait. He's been there for 40 minutes already. His security detail is making everyone nervous." "Of course they are." Maya finished the chest tube, checked the seal, made sure her patient was stable. "Sarah, you got this. Go deal with your crime lord. We're good here." Maya stripped off her bloody gloves, washed her hands thoroughly, and headed to the waiting area where Victor was indeed sitting with a massive bouquet of flowers that looked like they cost more than her rent. He stood when she approached, and Maya was struck again by how he managed to look both dangerous and vulnerable at the same time. Today he was in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, his hair slightly messy, his eyes tracking her movement with that intense focus that made her pulse stutter. "You can't keep showing up at my workplace," she said without preamble. "People are starting to ask questions." "Let them ask. I brought you flowers." He held out the bouquet, a stunning arrangement of orange and yellow blooms mixed with deep purple irises. "To thank you for putting up with my 3 a.m. existential crises." "It was 11:45, not 3 a.m., and you don't need to bring me flowers for doing what I said I'd do." But she took them anyway because they were beautiful and nobody had brought her flowers in years. "What are you really doing here, Victor?" "Can we talk, somewhere private?" Maya led him to the same consultation room where this had all started 3 weeks ago. It felt like longer. It felt like she'd known him for years instead of weeks, like he'd always been part of her life instead of a dangerous disruption to her carefully ordered existence. She set the flowers on the table and turned to face him. "What's wrong?" "Why do you assume something's wrong?" "Because you showed up at my work unannounced with expensive flowers, and you look like you haven't slept in days. So either something's wrong or you're about to tell me you're giving up on treatment. Which is it?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're too perceptive for your own good." "Occupational hazard. Talk to me." He moved to the window, his favorite spot, she'd noticed, always needing to see the way out, and stood there for a long moment before speaking. "Dr. Okonkwo wants to try something new. Combination therapy, medication to help with blood flow, plus continued psychological work, plus..." He stopped, his shoulders tense. "Plus, she suggested I might benefit from having a partner, someone I trust, someone who could help me work through the psychological blocks in a practical setting." Maya's brain took a second to process what he was actually saying. Then it clicked. "She wants you to have a sexual partner, as part of treatment. She called it graduated exposure therapy with a trusted companion. The idea is that my body has associated intimacy with trauma. To retrain that response, I need positive experiences. Gentle, gradual exposure to intimacy in a safe context." He turned to face her. "She suggested I ask you." Maya's brain short-circuited. "I'm sorry, what?" "She said you'd be ideal because I already trust you. You understand the medical aspects, and you're not emotionally invested in the outcome. You could provide objective feedback and help me navigate the process without the pressure of a romantic relationship." "Victor, I know, absolutely not, that's no." Maya was already shaking her head, backing toward the door. "We talked about this, boundaries, professional distance, not crossing lines." "I know, and I told her no initially, but she made a compelling argument." He moved toward her, not threatening, just earnest. "Maya, I trust you. I don't trust easily, and I definitely don't trust anyone with this kind of vulnerability. But you've seen me at my worst. You've talked me through panic attacks at midnight. You've called me on my bullshit and supported me through the hard parts. If I'm going to do this with anyone, I want it to be you. This is insane. I'm not a sex therapist. I'm an ER doctor who agreed to be your emotional support human, not your. She couldn't even say it. My partner in exposure therapy? He said it clinically, like they were discussing a treatment protocol and not the most inappropriate boundary violation in the history of bad decisions. I know it's asking a lot, but Dr. Okonkwo said. I don't care what Dr. Okonkwo said. Maya's voice rose despite her best efforts. She's not the one being asked to do sexual things with a patient. You're not my doctor, we established that. You're my friend. Friends don't, Victor, this is. She ran her hands over her face, trying to organize thoughts that were scattering like leaves in wind. Let me get this straight. Dr. Okonkwo, a medical professional, suggested that I, someone with zero training in sex therapy, should help you work through erectile dysfunction by engaging in sexual activities with you. As therapy. Graduated intimacy exercises. Starting with non-sexual touch, progressing slowly based on comfort level. She said it could take months, that there's no pressure for actual intercourse, just rebuilding positive associations with intimacy. And you thought I'd agree to this because you care about helping people heal, because you've invested 3 weeks in supporting my recovery, because... He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his features. Because I'm asking, and I never ask for anything, Maya. I demand, I take, I manipulate. But I'm asking you, genuinely asking, if you'd be willing to help me with this. Maya's brain was at war with her body. Her brain was screaming that this was professional suicide, boundary violation, absolutely the worst idea in a series of increasingly bad ideas. Her body was reminding her that she found Victor attractive, that she hadn't been touched with genuine desire in over a year, that the idea of slowly, carefully exploring intimacy with him made her pulse race and her skin warm. I need to think about this, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make right now, in a hospital, while I'm covered in someone else's blood and running on 4 hours of sleep. Of course, take all the time you need. And I need to talk to Dr. Okonkwo myself. Hear exactly what she's proposing and what the therapeutic rationale is. Because if this is just you trying to get me into bed by disguising it as medical treatment. It's not. His voice was fierce. Maya, I swear to you, this is legitimate. Dr. Okonkwo spent an hour explaining the research, showing me case studies, discussing ethical considerations. This is a recognized treatment approach for trauma-induced sexual dysfunction. And she only suggested it because I told her about you, about how you've been supporting me, about how I trust you in ways I've never trusted anyone. You told her about me. I talk about you constantly. She says I light up when I mention you, that I'm more animated discussing our conversations than anything else in my life. He moved closer, close enough that Maya had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You've become important to me, Maya, more important than I expected. More important than is probably smart for either of us, but I can't help it. You make me feel human again. You make me think maybe I could be whole again. And if you say no, I'll respect that and we'll continue as we have been. But if you say yes... If I say yes, everything changes. Everything's already changed. We're just deciding whether to acknowledge it. Maya's pager went off. Trauma incoming, multiple victims, mass casualty event. She'd never been so grateful for an interruption in her life. I have to go. Major trauma, multiple patients. She moved toward the door, needing distance, needing space to think. I'll call you tomorrow, after I've slept and processed and maybe consulted with every medical ethics board in the country. Maya. She turned back. He looked vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once, and something in her chest cracked at the sight. I'm not saying no, she said quietly, but I'm not saying yes either. I'm saying I need to think about whether I can do this without destroying the boundaries that keep both of us safe. Okay. Okay, he smiled, small and genuine. Thank you for not immediately throwing me out. Day's not over yet, but she was smiling too, despite everything. Go home, Victor, get some sleep, and stop showing up at my workplace with expensive flowers. You're giving the gossips ammunition. Let them gossip. You're worth gossiping about. Maya left before she could do something stupid like kiss him or agree to his insane proposal or forget every professional boundary she'd ever learned. The trauma kept her busy for the next 6 hours. Car accident, multiple vehicles, 3 critical patients who required everything she had. By the time her shift ended at 8 a.m., she was exhausted, covered in various bodily fluids, and no closer to making a decision about Victor's proposal. She found Keisha in their apartment kitchen, making coffee and looking entirely too awake for someone who claimed to be nocturnal. You look like death, Keisha observed, but also like something happened. Spill. Maya collapsed at the kitchen table. Victor wants me to be his sex therapy partner. Keisha dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the tile floor, sending ceramic shards and coffee everywhere. Neither of them moved. I'm sorry, Keisha said slowly. Did you just say what I think you said? His therapist suggested graduated exposure therapy with a trusted partner to help him work through his dysfunction. He asked if I'd be willing to do it. And you said? I said I'd think about it. Maya put her head in her hands. I'm actually considering it, Keisha. I'm sitting here thinking about all the therapeutic rationale and medical justification and whether this could actually help him heal. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. You're attracted to him, and you're trying to intellectualize it into something clinical, so you don't have to admit you want to sleep with him. I don't want to sleep with him. Liar. Keisha grabbed paper towels, started cleaning up the coffee. Maya, be honest with yourself if nobody else. You've been talking about this man constantly for 3 weeks. Your face lights up when he texts. You spent 2 hours picking an outfit for coffee. You're already emotionally invested. The question isn't whether you want to do this. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit you want to do this. It's not about bravery. It's about professional boundaries and ethical considerations, and you're scared. Keisha sat down, her expression softening. You're scared because this man is dangerous and complicated and could break your heart into pieces. You're scared because you haven't let yourself be vulnerable with anyone in years. You're scared because you actually care about him, and caring about people means they can hurt you. Maya's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. What if I do this and it destroys everything? What if I cross this line and I can't come back? What if? What if it's exactly what both of you need? Keisha reached across the table, grabbed Maya's hand. What if this is how you both heal? Not just him from his trauma, but you from yours. When's the last time you let someone see you, really see you, body and soul, without armor? That's not what this is about. Isn't it? You're so busy taking care of everyone else, you forget you deserve care too. You deserve to be touched with tenderness. You deserve to be wanted. You deserve intimacy that's gentle and safe and real. Keisha squeezed her hand. Maybe Victor needs you to help him heal, but maybe you need him just as much. Maya sat there, tears finally spilling over, and let herself consider the possibility that Keisha was right. That this wasn't just about helping Victor. That this was also about helping herself. That maybe, just maybe, they could heal each other. I need to talk to Dr. Okonkwo, she said finally, wiping her eyes. Get the actual medical protocol, understand what I'd be agreeing to, and then you decide if you're brave enough to take the risk. And then I decide if I'm brave enough to take the risk, Maya echoed. She called Dr. Okonkwo that afternoon, after sleeping for 4 hours and consuming enough coffee to fuel a small army. Dr. Chen, I was hoping you'd call, Dr. Okonkwo said warmly. Victor mentioned he'd spoken with you. He mentioned you suggested I become his sex therapy partner. Yes, I'd like to understand the therapeutic rationale. For the next 45 minutes, Dr. Okonkwo explained the treatment protocol in exhaustive detail. The research supporting graduated exposure therapy for trauma-induced sexual dysfunction. The importance of having a partner who wasn't emotionally invested in performance outcomes. The careful progression from non-sexual touch to potentially sexual contact, always at the patient's pace. The need for clear communication, boundaries, and the understanding that this was medical treatment, not a romantic relationship. The goal, Dr. Okonkwo explained, is to help Victor's nervous system relearn that intimacy is safe. That vulnerability doesn't equal death. That his body can respond to positive touch without triggering trauma responses. You'd be functioning as a therapeutic partner, helping him practice consent, communication, and gradual exposure to intimacy in a controlled environment. And you think I'm qualified for this? I think you're exactly what he needs. You understand trauma. You're clinically knowledgeable enough to recognize warning signs. You're someone he trusts implicitly. And from what he's told me, you have the emotional intelligence to navigate this without making him feel pressured or judged. Doctor. Okonkwo paused. I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't think it could genuinely help him, Dr. Chen. And I wouldn't suggest you specifically if I didn't think you were capable of maintaining appropriate boundaries. What if I can't? Maintain boundaries, I mean. Then we reassess. But Dr. Chen, from everything Victor has told me, you're one of the most boundaried people he's ever met. I trust you to know your limits and communicate them clearly. Maya hung up feeling more confused than when she'd started the call. That evening, she texted Victor. Maya, I talked to Dr. Okonkwo. I understand the protocol. I'm still thinking. V, take all the time you need. No pressure. Maya, that's a lie. There's pressure. Maybe not from you specifically, but this is a pressure situation. V, fair. Then let me be clear. I want you to say yes. I want your help, but only if you're genuinely comfortable with it. I won't pressure you into something you're not ready for. Maya, what if I'm never ready? V, then we continue as we are, and I figure out another approach. You're not my only option, Maya. You're my preferred option. There's a difference. She stared at that message for a long time. Then she typed, I need 3 days to think, to decide, to figure out if I'm brave enough for this. V, 3 days. And Maya, whatever you decide, thank you for even considering it. That alone means more than you know. Maya set down her phone and tried to imagine it, touching Victor with intimacy, helping him relearn vulnerability, being the person who guided him back to wholeness. It terrified her. It also thrilled her in ways she wasn't ready to examine. 3 days to decide if she was brave enough to help heal a broken man. 3 days to decide if she was brave enough to let herself be healed in the process. No pressure, she muttered to herself. Right, no pressure at all. Have you ever been offered something you desperately wanted but were terrified to accept? Let me know in the comments. And if you're invested in finding out what Maya decides, hit that like button and subscribe. The next part is where everything changes. I promise it'll be worth the wait.